much for this. Um,
Oh,
I'm really, really excited that you're doing this. Um, I've been reading and seeing you on social media and YouTube and seeing all these great gigs you're doing.
I'm
Um,
trying.
yeah. So, I really want to give the listener a chance to hear what it's like for a great bassist touring, playing with someone like Gino Vanelli, how you prepared yourself for this, the skills, just real musician questions.
Yeah, yeah,
Not
yeah,
not
absolutely.
so I'm not so interested in your equipment or amp,
That's good.
but
Neither am I.
yeah, yeah. So, what year did we study together? When did I have you?
I think that was my second go around at Berkeley, so that
Hmm.
was probably 2001,
Oof!
2002.
Wow,
Yeah, maybe 2000, late 2002, something like that.
seems like yesterday.
Yeah, it really does. And man, you had such an impact. Of course, there's a lot of great teachers there, and I had a lot of great moments with
Sure.
different people. But whenever I think back to that time, you're always at the forefront of my mind as having the most impact and making things make sense for me.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I'm very curious. Well, how do you mean?
Well, I didn't understand. The first time around at Berkeley, I started as a drummer. I was a little metal
I
drummer.
remember that. We had that in common. We talked a
Yeah.
lot about that.
I was so lost swimming in a sea of harmony and terminology
Oh yeah.
and things concepts I couldn't grasp, or at least I couldn't, I might understand them intellectually, but I had no idea how to transfer them to the
Sure.
instrument. And you always had a way of just kind of like cutting through my muddled mind and getting right to the heart of something, where, just saying the right thing at the right moment to kind of
Yeah.
turn, flip the light switch on a little bit. And,
Right.
yeah, for whatever reason, I always really connected with the way you explained things, and just your whole vibe in our lessons was. I was more comfortable with you than I was with most, and
Yeah.
I felt like it was the first time. It was kind of a safe space. I felt like it was okay to not know exactly what I was doing, but try anyway.
And something. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure that went on and on in your career, as far as you encounter things and you go, I think the idea is you have the tools to teach yourself or people to ask, which I've never been afraid to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
allowing yourself the freedom to not know everything and to learn, sometimes have to learn as you go. And just as long as you put the work in, trust that you'll come through the other side,
Yes.
relatively unscathed.
Now, I think that's something really important for most musicians to know is that I imagine we all want to quit at some time
Yeah.
where it's sort of you're so upset about something, someone said something to you that really knocked your confidence out, and you go, "That's it. I'm done with this. I'm going to be an accountant or whatever."
Yeah.
But if you're meant to do it, you're just kind of playing the next day.
Yeah,
You're just kind
exactly.
of doing it, and it's unexplainable.
Yeah, and that's kind of the key to it all, is just not giving up. And I think inherent to that is probably that whatever that thing is that you and I have, where even in the worst of moments when you feel like, man, I'm just not cut out for this, I need to figure something else out. There's nothing in the world you'd rather do, so you keep playing anyway, you keep
Right.
gigging anyway, and then you keep learning anyway.
Exactly. So yes, I've seen your excellent video series on all kinds of things. The latest one I saw was you were talking about creating this synth sound. And I
Thank
was also amazed how much your playing has changed. And
Yeah.
my observation is your harmony got a lot deeper. You know, your technique is just through the roof. It
Oh,
just,
thank you.
incredible. Um, it seems like you're using a technique that has become fairly common for some people, which is a very light touch on the. I believe you're using a ramp, or sometimes you do on some of your basses.
Yeah, yeah. In some of my basses, I have kind of an oversized pickup
Right.
mold, which acts as a ramp.
Oh,
But yeah, and
gotcha.
I got very into a three finger technique, which kind of led me into a little bit of a lighter touch.
Yeah. The
Um,
first time I saw that was Matt Garrison,
yeah.
Matthew Garrison. Now, do you keep the action very low on your bass?
No,
Hmm.
that's where I differ a little bit from Matt and a few other guys.
Yeah.
Um, I used to keep
Hmm.
my action incredibly low. Um, but by virtue of being, just doing the completely freelance thing, I started doing gigs which required me to dig in a little more and get some different sounds.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
was really struck by the how much tonal variety you could get when you raised your action
Yeah.
enough. So I kind of found a sweet spot where it's low enough that it's comfortable,
Yeah.
but it's hard enough that I can really dig in and it's not going to fret out.
Just for
And
the feeling too.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to sink into it a little bit, and
Yeah.
you got to let it. It's got to be able to ring.
Exactly. So sometimes when I'm playing rock, and sometimes I'll play with a pick. Usually I don't have one though. I'll
Hmm.
just smack that thing,
Oh
and
yeah,
it feels proper as well. That's the sound. That's
yeah. Exactly,
it's not
exactly.
pretty.
Not supposed to be.
Exactly. Now the other thing I remember, and I remember we talked about this a lot, was rhythm.
There
For
you go.
me, I always thought about the bass as a drum.
Yeah,
And I knew that from you I found out you were a drummer.
yeah.
I recognize I could hear that in your playing. A really great quarter note in playing with
Mm.
such confidence, and that comes from the drums, I imagine, correct?
Yeah, but the
Or some of
rhythmic
it.
language was my first language, and that's
Yeah.
always been my most, my most comfortable place.
Hmm.
The harmonic language it felt very foreign for a long time, and it was
Hmm.
something I really had to work through. And I mean, especially post Berkeley,
Yeah.
talking about wanting to quit, I almost quit playing altogether after school because I just thought I just don't have what it takes to do this. And I thought, all right,
Hmm.
I don't know what else to do, so I'm going to really focus on this thing.
Yeah.
So I kind of worked it out for myself. But yeah, the rhythmic language was always my comfort zone. I still think
Yeah.
rhythmically. And then, especially once I kind of realized internally that we're essentially the bridge between the drummer and everybody else
Yeah.
in the band, I thought, well, this is okay, this makes sense. Now I just
Yeah.
need to kind of tie together this other side of the bandstand
Right.
a
Right.
little bit.
Yeah. And tell me if you agree with this. I think that's why it's so important to learn how to play walking bass lines because you're playing the rhythm, laying down that quarter note, and you gotta outline the harmony at the same time, each note.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. No, I've once I really invested myself in the process of walking bass lines, I felt like that's when my harmony started to come together because I was
Mm.
really focusing on chord notes, chord tones, and setting target notes and figuring out how to get from here to there,
Yes.
but all while maintaining good solid time and
Hmm.
feel
Yes.
and kind of tying all these things together. Yeah.
Yeah. You always been such an excellent player. In fact, I remember at Berkeley, I don't know if at the time the great woman bass player,
Esperanza?
Esperanza, that's it. I don't know if you know this, but when you played your senior recital, she sat right in the front.
Oh, was she there?
Yes, I remember I went to the bathroom and I heard it, and so I walked in the room. I tried to make it, I tried to be invisible because I know how distracting that can be.
Yeah,
Oh, I bet he'll like this.
I was terrified too. Oh my God.
But you did a great job. You looked really relaxed, but Esperanza loved your playing.
Wow.
Yeah, she sat right in the front and she was like, yeah, and you probably don't remember. I bet you didn't know who she was because she walked right up to you and she said, "Yeah, I love your playing."
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah,
I didn't know who she was at the time, and
yeah.
I'm glad I didn't because I was already nervous enough.
Well, she wasn't a big star back then, but you kind of knew good things were going to happen for her,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. So tell me about playing with Gino Vanelli because he's one of my all-time favorites.
Oh, what a
Brother,
gig.
brother to brother. All the compositions are amazing. Just tell me whatever comes
Gino,
to mind.
it's that gig is kind of the best of all worlds.
Hmm.
Um, because I mean, for one, he's a great songwriter,
Oh
obviously.
yeah.
And he's the real deal. He
Mm.
does all of his own arrangements. He does he does everything, and he hears everything. You know, he'll stop and say, "That's a it's a flat 13 on that chord." You
Wow.
know, so he hears everything. He's got perfect pitch as far as I can tell.
Son of a bum.
Even to the point where during sound checks, he'll ask the sound man for 2 dB less of 1K in his reverb, and he can hear the difference.
That's amazing.
But that gig, because you have all of that, but I mean, it's adult chord changes. You know, these are not dumbed down pop tunes. There's some serious harmony going on, and everybody in the band is just smoking. You know, you just feel like you gotta bring your A game every time. So I've had a blast on that gig. I've been playing. I recorded with him first in 2009, and I've been touring with him since 2010. Yeah, the album A Good Thing. If you check out that album, there's only one track remaining because he's also a perfectionist and he can't stop fiddling. And he does have a love affair with virtual instruments when he records albums. So I recorded the entire album, and ultimately he kept playing with the arrangements and changing everything around. And it's an upright bass patch on all but one track. I play fretless on one track.
Do you know who tells a story like that over and over is Marcus Miller.
Huh?
Yeah, he talked about laying some tracks down for Steely Dan when he was like 22. And he was
Yeah,
like, yeah, this is killing you, doing his thumb thing. And then he
yeah,
heard the tune a year later and said, that ain't me.
yeah,
And it turned out to be Anthony Jackson.
yeah.
And he said the moral of the story is everyone gets their tracks erased at some time or another. Hallelujah.
It's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was surprised when I finally got the CD in my hand. I was like, "Oh man, I'm gonna check this out," and I started playing it. And I was like,
Ugh.
"Upright bass, wait, what?" Yeah, but no, he's been a real joy to work with, and I hope he keeps going for a long time. We've had a couple tours canceled this year, obviously. So yeah, everything got postponed, pushed back to 2021. So hopefully we can get back to it.
Oh, I hope so. I hope there's something going on.
Yeah,
You know,
and
it's
he's a
amazing.
local. He lives in this area.
Get out of town.
Yeah,
Really?
his
I
his
didn't know
wife
that.
Trisha since the '80s. She's from here originally. This is where he met her, and
Oh,
at a certain point after they left LA, they came back to the Portland area.
oh, whoa.
Yeah.
That is really cool. I had no idea. You know, though, you started playing with him in 2009, and you're still playing with him.
Yeah.
You know, that says something. Of all the cats he can hire, right? He's got anybody,
Anybody? Yeah.
anybody. Damian Erskine.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things, one of the things you don't learn much in school. Although now that you have a professional music program at Berkeley, you
Yeah.
didn't when I was there, but maybe you do more so now. Is how to get gigs, how to keep gigs, how to be a professional musician. And one of the things I've always prided myself on, and maybe this is a kind of a natural byproduct of never thinking too highly about myself and my playing in contrast to others. I'm always hyper aware of my own deficiencies. I'm always very eager to please and very aware of the fact that I'm lucky to be doing what I'm doing and nurturing that reality. So I take direction well.
That's great.
Yeah, it's always kind of been my way, and those times on the road where the flight's delayed and the food stinks and everybody's grumping and grousing, and I'm still thinking, man, it still beats the hell out of throwing drywall. I'm cool.
That's really amazing. I mean, that's the attitude we all want, but the fact that you're able to live in that zone is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I'd rather be stranded in an airport overnight than do half the jobs I've had in my life. So it's
Yeah.
pretty easy to keep that perspective.
Me too. I've had some, I've bled a bit, let's just say.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I would love to know what the rehearsals are like with Gino Vanelli, what it looks like.
Well, he, especially when he has new tunes, he tends to, like I said, he's very adept at manipulating virtual instruments. He tends to make entire demos of the song with virtual instruments. So initially, I used to pretty much just transcribe the bass tracks and then slowly, make them my own on the gig. Now, by this point, I've got a pretty good sense of what he wants, and I can listen to a track and kind of know what he's going to expect to be there and where I can take liberties. So I generally learn from those. Rehearsals are pretty straightforward. If there's a new tune, we'll spend, say, before a tour, we might spend an entire day on that one tune, just running it over and over and over again, trouble checking, spot checking sections, getting some unison lines, and his brain's always going. We might run through it and be like, "That was great, but you know what? We need a slick unison line here for the guitar player and the bass player," and then he'll have us come up with something on the spot. And oftentimes he'll sing us fragments of what he wants, and we have to kind of transcribe his voice and find it. And then after that, then we usually just run the set once before we hit the road. He kind of trusts everybody to do their homework ahead of time, and pretty much just run the set. And if anything needs more attention, we'll give it to it.
Right.
But it's usually pretty quick and painless. The recording process was a lot more intensive. It would just be me and the drummer and Gino, and we could spend 2 days just trying to get the rhythm track together. And once you feel like you finally got it and it sounds great, then you'd say, "Okay, now let's record it. Now let's go for the real take." And yeah, we'd spend half a week on just the rhythm track for one song, and full days in the studio. And he's very exacting. He knows exactly what he wants. So it's an intense process, and it's not an environment everybody thrives in. But I really appreciated the attention to detail, and I learned so much getting somebody else's perspective. I've always thought that was immensely important to understand, be able to translate what somebody wants, but also just to hear how somebody else would approach a passage. It's educational, so I always kind of got into the process. I remember with one quick little weekend tour in Florida we had, pianist had a conflict, so we had a sub on the gig, and he did a great job. But we're sitting on a plane, and he leaned over and he's like, "Man, I swear, at the end of this tune, I hit one bum note, in the middle of this tons of things going on type of section." And he's like, "I swear, Gino looked over me like he actually, he heard everything."
Wow.
And I said, "Oh yeah, ask him. He'll tell you all about it." And so he leaned over to Gino. He said, "Gino, the end of whatever tune it was." And Gino looked back and said, "Yeah, you hit an F sharp instead of an F natural."
Yeah.
So for me, it's repetition.
Yeah.
You can tell I have a little studio in my backyard, and I'm pretty sure the reason my wife let me build this studio is because she got sick of me repeating Gino Vanelli tunes endlessly throughout the day in the house. If it's a tricky passage or something, I'm a big fan of slowing things down. I figure if you can't play them slow, you can't play them fast.
Right.
So I work out the fingering, decide how I want to navigate this thing,
Yeah.
and then just slowly, 60 BPM,
Yeah.
and I'll wait till I can play it twice before I do it at 65 BPM.
I think I taught you that anyway. So,
You probably did.
I don't know, but that's a controversial thing about the transcribing and the tempos. I have other teachers say, "Never do that." You got to hear it at the tempo, and
I've never been one to say there is one way to do anything.
right.
I think there's likely one way that works really well for this person, and there's probably another way that's going to work really well for this person.
Sure.
So I made my largest strides once I really evaluated how I best learn.
Accepted yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Accepted myself and what my process needed to be, and then I was able to kind of hone in on that process and really make progress. I had a lot of teachers tell me, "Don't think in shapes." But shapes were how I was able to first see information. And then through repeating shapes and starting to try and use those shapes through chord changes, through
I
jazz
remember
standards.
that.
Yeah. Then I slowly started to internalize what notes I was playing and the harmonic relationships.
Right.
And, once I married the shapes with harmonic awareness, then it became vocabulary. Yeah, and initially, when you're learning something, it might be a three-part process. You might think, okay, it's a D minor 7 flat 5, so okay, there's the D minor 7 flat 5, here's the shape. And then repetition. Now it's just straight to D and the shape. repetition, repetition. Now it's just here with the shape. You're taking
Right.
multiple steps and through repetition turning them into one step or, an immediate
Right.
action.
Totally, totally. And I really like what you're saying too. This is my process. This is how I do, and this is what works for me. Do you find you learn a lot from teaching?
I've learned more from teaching than I ever did from studying. No, it's
Exactly.
interesting. I have my wife to thank for that in a way because when people first started asking me for lessons, I didn't feel qualified to teach. I still felt like too much of a student.
Yeah.
And she convinced me that, there's always going to be somebody who understands something more than you, always somebody who understands something less than you. You just have to trust that you have something to offer somebody. And so I started teaching, and I realized, first thing that struck me was I don't know how to I don't know how to organize my information in a meaningful way. Like I don't know how I know what I know. So it really forced me to look at those
Yeah.
things that I know and
Yeah.
evaluate how I came to know them, especially the things I took for granted, maybe the things I learned when I was younger. And then organizing that information. And then you slowly start to see how different things relate to other things. And you start organizing information for people. And it's like everything just kind of comes into place. And you learn about process
Right.
through thinking about somebody else's process. You learn about your own process and your own practicing and your own development gets more finely tuned. That acceptance of yourself is huge. I mean, it's some of my largest breakthroughs as a player came through my awareness and accepting of myself and my deficiencies and my strengths and my deficiencies. I remember one of my biggest obstacles to playing, especially jazz, but playing music in general even, was the idea that every time I played, I was comparing myself on some level to somebody.
Yeah.
When I played a walking bass line, I was hearing, my teachers at Berkeley or Ray Brown or Christian McBride, and I'm thinking, this is dumb. And so because I was that, I wound up crippling myself a little bit. Like, I handicapped myself because I wouldn't allow myself to fully explore what it was I could do and stretch those limitations. And once I realized that, what, it's only music, I'm going to have fun with this. I'm going to see where it takes me. I'm going to do what I want to do and what makes sense to me and what sounds good to me. And maybe that'll evolve, maybe it won't, but like I'm just going to, and lo and behold, as soon as I just allowed myself to play freely and express myself however that was coming through, immediately sounded better, you know? And the same thing with a teacher. As soon as I stopped trying to be, Mr. Teacher, and just started being me, who might know something I can help you with, and maybe not. And if not, let's figure it out together. I don't have to have all the answers.
Exactly. Wow.
And then through that process, we're both learning how to learn. So money well spent.
Yeah.
So it's that acceptance of yourself and willingness to just be who you are on the instrument and as an educator and all of it. It's impactful.
I love it. One of the things that comes to mind from um, this topic is the book called Effortless Mastery by Kenny Werner.
Yeah, I love that book.
And he really described um, these things we're talking about brilliantly. But yeah, you have to accept it's just too big. The vastness of information and all the art to
It's
explore. It's
infinite.
too much.
There's
Yeah,
no finish line with this stuff. There is no end point.
no,
You never know everything. You never have it all together.
right.
We're all somewhere within the process. And I think as soon as I got comfortable with that, and as soon as I was cool with that, I immediately became a better player and a better educator.
Talk to me about how you achieve your sound sonically, as far as it could be any bass you're playing, anything from a Fodera to a Fender Precision. What have you learned about how to create a great sound sonically?
Well, a couple of things come to mind. One is one thing I learned through doing a lot of recording sessions was that what you dial in for a bass tone before the gig might not be what's going to work best for the gig.
Right.
You need to really listen to the whole sound of the band in the third person a little bit, and think of your tone and from that perspective. But as far as dialing in rooms and things like that, the thing that pops into mind is that the magic is in the mids. It's if you want a little more, want a little more bump. It's the low mids. If you want a little more clarity, it's the high mids.
Yeah.
The woomph and the glass of the treble, the woomph of the bass and the glass of the treble is it was kind of my nemesis for a long time. So often when I'm looking for clarity, I'll actually drop the treble and bump my high mids a little bit.
Yeah.
Little things like that. I've realized the mids are really kind of where it's at for the bass specifically.
What kind of basses are you enjoying these days? You find yourself kind of grabbing on the way out of the door for a gig.
I have a guy named Pete Schold who lives in Ohio who's been making my basses for a long time. I have, of course, I have a Fender Mustang and a jazz bass and a P bass, and a couple other, kind of classic tools, mostly for the studio or for certain gigs. But I have basically, I primarily use two basses. One is a Schold, just a 4-string kind of custom passive.
Yeah.
I've become a huge fan of just volume, tone.
Passive.
Yeah, passive.
Yeah, I love it.
And then you mentioned the ramp thing. And this is the 6-string. This is my jazz box.
Good God, I'm sort of intimidated.
An airplane hanger. Yeah, this thing's a beast. It's like chambered and super thick. It's hollow inside.
Oh my God.
It's still passive. Just volume, tone.
Oh my God, I wish I could hear it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful.
Next time, yeah.
I love his instruments. I have a handful of, well, not a handful, but I've got another 6 that he built me that I use on Gino's gig.
Yeah.
And another 4-string, but these are my 2 primary basses. I'm pretty much 99% of the time grabbing one of these 2.
Do you find the 6-string to be very useful to you on most of the gigs you do?
Before this bass, the 6-string was pretty much just if it was a heavy reading gig,
Yeah.
like a Latin gig, where I wanted to be able to play in more range in one position.
Yeah.
Certainly if I needed the low B string, because I don't have a 5, I went straight from 4 to 6 at Berkeley.
Wow.
Or a heavy soloing gig.
Right.
If I know I'm just going to be hiddling all night long on every tune, I tend to bring the 6. The 4 is kind of my happy place, but this bass in particular sounds so good that even if I'm doing a songwriter session, I'll usually bring it with me, and I'll plug it in, and I'll just like look at the producer, and I'll be like, just wait till you hear it.
Wait till you hear it before you make me play a Fender Precision.
Yeah. Just wait till you hear it. It's just got this purity of sound, and it's a very even. It does something special that I love. So I do bring this on gigs where I wouldn't normally think to bring a 6-string, just because it does this. It's so versatile sonically. So yeah, but certainly if there's chords soloing or I need to lay super low, I tend to bring the 6 on a lot of the neo soul type gigs just for that extra low range. I do have a detuner hip shot drop D thing on the 4-string, but it's just not the same. You need that big string vibrating.
Yes. That was great. I hope I didn't talk too much. I'm so new to this, and the things you're saying just bring so much.
Oh no, man, it was perfect. It was wonderful.
Oh, great. Man, I'm proud of you. It's really, I love seeing this,
Thank you, brother.
Damian, thank you so much.
Yeah, brother. Take care of yourself, man.
You too. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye now. Hey, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that. That was the first in a series, Buda's Masters. And once again, I'd like to thank Damian Erskine, wonderful player, and as you could hear, a wonderful cat. And please look forward to more in this series. Bye-bye now.